stop carrying their burdens, a Zen story for letting go. Right now, your eyes might be staring into the dark corner of your ceiling, tracking the heavy cadence of your own breathing, while your mind carries out an invisible inspection of everyone you love. Maybe you are running through a mental checklist of the faces you encountered today, wondering if your words left a slight shadow on their faces, or if your silence was taken as a cold rejection. There is a specific quiet agony that comes from acting as the emotional lint roller for everyone around you, absorbing their unspoken frustrations, their sudden shifts in temperature, and their silent demands until your own chest feels entirely crowded out. You lie perfectly still, but beneath the surface, you are bracing under a mountain of unseen obligations. You feel an ancient, stubborn guilt that tells you if you dare to close your eyes and let go of the reins, someone else's world will fracture and fall apart. Dear friend, if you have spent this evening trying to manage the unseen weather inside another person's heart, know that your vigilance can finally rest here. The mattress beneath you is solid, steady, and asks nothing in return for holding you up. Outside your room, a cool autumn drizzle is tapping against the glass pane, a rhythmic, repetitive sound that slowly cools the heated edges of your thoughts. The air in your room carries the faint, clean scent of cedarwood, and the walls provide a quiet perimeter that shuts out the noisy demands of the daytime world. Nothing is required of your energy in this shelter. You do not need to solve a single relationship tonight, nor do you need to draft the perfect response to an unanswered message before your mind is allowed to seek shelter. The night has officially closed the ledger of your debts, and it is entirely safe for you to unbuckle the armor you have worn to keep everyone else steady. Your spirit is not defective because it feels this profound fatigue. What is happening within you right now is not a sign that your character is failing, but rather an indication that you have been carrying bundles that do not belong to your back. Tonight, no one will force your mind to become instantly silent, and no one will demand that you magically repair your boundaries. By tomorrow morning, we are simply going to sit quietly by the edge of your fatigue, learning how to loosen the knots that have bound your shoulders to the struggles of others. Consider how the mind works when it becomes entangled in the habit of hyper-responsibility. The overthinking intellect frequently convinces you that your exhaustion is a form of love, telling you that if you stop worrying about their happiness, it means you have stopped caring about them entirely. This is the profound paradox of the helpful heart, fear masquerading as devotion. It tricks you into believing that by keeping your muscles tense and your mind alert, you are somehow sheltering the people you love from their own difficult paths. Yet, deep Buddhist insight offers a completely different view of human connection. The teachings remind us that true compassion does not mean converting your spine into a permanent bridge for someone else to walk across, but rather maintaining a clear, open space where each person can discover their own footing on the earth. In a few moments, our path will lead us upward to a misty mountain ridge, where an old trail hut stands against the gathering autumn storm. But before we begin that climb, let your jaw drop slightly away from your teeth. Feel the tiny muscles around your eyelids soften and release their grip. You are completely insulated by the dark. The worries that are circling your awareness are merely distant echoes of a day that has already vanished into memory. They possess no hands to pull you backward, and they cannot alter the firm ground that supports you right now. We often believe that our internal distress is caused by our inability to make everyone around us perfectly content. We think that if we could only find the right combination of patience, or say the exact words to soothe their anger, our own hearts would finally feel light. But if you observe the heavy sensation in your chest right now, you will notice that the people you are trying to protect are not even in this room. Their moods and reactions exist only as images you are choosing to sustain with your current focus. The real exhaustion does not stem from their actual problems. It comes from the continuous internal effort you expend, trying to carry their packs alongside your own. You are creating a second weight by punishing yourself for wanting to step down from the burden. Let us travel in our minds to a narrow, rocky path that winds through ancient cedar groves, where the dark soil is wet with the first rains of the season. In this isolated place, the only sound is the creaking of timber branches under the pressure of the wind, and the mist hangs low over the gray stone steps. This is the place where we will begin to look at our own heavy habits, reflected in the simple, weathered objects of a mountain trail. When you are ready to climb higher into the mist and look closely at the things you have been carrying, simply say continue. The trail ascends through a corridor of weeping ferns, where the slate underfoot grows increasingly slick from the condensing mountain fog. A young traveler named Sora walked this path with his chin pressed tight against his chest, his eyes fixed entirely on the narrow lip of stone directly before his toes. On his back rested a massive, wide-framed pack saddle crafted from splitting pieces of green cedarwood. It was a clumsy, unyielding structure, built with multiple tiered shelves that extended over his shoulders like heavy wooden wings. Upon these shelves sat 6 large, cubical blocks of raw, unrefined mountain salt, intended for the communal kitchens of the High Valley settlement. The autumn rains had begun to settle into the wood, causing the fibrous hemp ropes that bound the frame to swell, tighten, and cut directly through his hemp tunic into the skin of his collarbones. Every time Sora took a step, the wood groaned beneath the shifting mass of the mineral blocks. The salt was heavy, but the true weight came from the way the moisture had begun to dissolve the edges of the cubes, causing a slow, briny water to weep down the back of his neck, stinging the raw tracks left by the straps. Sora believed that if he stopped moving, even for the duration of a short breath, the unbalanced frame would tip backward into the gorge, shattering the supply that the villagers expected him to deliver. He had assumed the role of the sole carrier, because he noticed the village elders looked anxious when the salt cellars grew shallow. He had not been asked to carry the entire load alone, yet the silent anticipation he read in their faces had felt like a formal command. As the dusk began to thicken into a bruised purple shadow, the path narrowed to a jagged ledge where a small timber hut clung to the side of the cliff. Sitting on a low stool under the overhanging thatch of the roof was an old layman named Kenji, whose hands were covered in white scars from decades of twisting thick vines. Kenji was responsible for clearing the rockfalls along this ridge, ensuring the path remained stable for those who traveled between the worlds. He did not rise when Sora approached, but his milky, deliberate eyes moved smoothly from the young man's trembling knees up to the groaning peak of the wooden pack saddle. Sora halted, his breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps that shook his entire frame. He did not drop the pack. He simply leaned his forehead against a wet support post of the hut, his hands white where they gripped the steadying guide ropes of his harness. The wood of his frame creaked in the wind, a sound like teeth grinding in the dark. Kenji reached down and picked up an old wooden mallet, using its blunt head to tap lightly against the lowest crossbar of Sora's saddle. The vibration rang dull and wet through the structure. Kenji asked why the traveler had chosen a frame that lacked any sliding pins, pointing out that the wood had swollen so tightly against the joints that the entire apparatus was rigid as ice. Sora managed to reply through clenched teeth, explaining that if the joints were allowed to shift, the salt blocks would slide during the steep climb, and the people at the summit would find their pots empty because of his carelessness. He stated that his endurance was the only thing keeping the cargo from dissolving in the storm. The old trailkeeper stood up slowly, his joints making a small clicking sound that matched the rustle of the dry cedar needles on the ground. He did not attempt to unbuckle Sora's harness, nor did he offer a comforting speech about the nobility of labor. Instead, Kenji walked into the small hut and returned with a heavy iron wedge and a small bowl of cold tallow grease. He instructed Sora to remain completely still, then slid the tip of the iron wedge directly into the primary knot, where the shoulder straps met the main cedar frame. With one precise measured stroke of his mallet, Kenji struck the iron wedge. The impact sent a sharp shockwave through Sora's spine, but the dense hemp knot did not unravel. It simply groaned as the metal forced its way between the compressed fibers, creating a fraction of an inch of empty space where there had been an iron grip. A thin trickle of trapped rainwater squeezed out of the rope, running clear down the gray stone of the ledge. Kenji told the young man to slide his thumbs beneath the leather guards on his collarbones, asking him to feel whether the weight belonged to the mountain path or to the structure he had built to survive it. In that moment of forced stillness, as the wind whistled through the open gaps of the timber hut, Sora felt a sudden, strange coldness wash over his skin. The knot had not dropped the load, yet the tiny separation caused by the wedge allowed his lungs to expand fully for the first time since he had departed from the foothills. He realized that his shoulders had become so accustomed to the continuous downward bite of the straps that he could no longer distinguish between the natural gravity of the earth and the artificial tightness of his own grip. The lesson of the wedge, however, remained partially concealed beneath the shadow of the oncoming gale. Sora looked at the small bowl of tallow in Kenji's hand, wondering why the old man was preparing to grease a frame that was already slipping from the dampness. The storm was rising, and the true nature of the wooden joints had not yet revealed its secret to the tired traveler. When you are ready to hear how the old man adjusted the wood, say continue. This mountain journey does not ask you to cast away your genuine care for the people in your life, nor does it suggest that you should grow distant, cold, or indifferent to their struggles. The old trailkeeper did not demand that Sora hurl his cargo over the precipice into the dark void below. The salt itself was necessary, and the desire to nourish the village was born from an honest, generous impulse of the heart. The spiritual path is never a command to stop feeling, nor is it an invitation to desert your loved ones when the winter rains begin to fall. It is an exploration of a much gentler secret, a quiet realization that the deepest ache within your body right now does not belong to the actual load you carry, but to the unyielding framework you have built around it. The primary distress we experience in our relationships rarely stems from the natural presence of other people's problems. It is entirely natural to feel a soft, protective sorrow when someone you care about is walking through their own dark season. The true exhaustion, the structural strain that keeps your mind racing at midnight, is created by the rigid belief that you must freeze your own joints to guarantee their stability. We construct an elaborate internal apparatus of hypervigilance, locking our emotional pegs into place, tightening the hemp cords of our attention until there is no room for a single breath of uncertainty. We assume that if we allow our own posture to relax, if we permit our own minds to find a moment of ease, the entire carriage of their well-being will slide out of control. This emotional locking is what ancient wisdom describes when it points to the root of human suffering. The mind possesses a habit of taking a fluid, changing circumstance, and attempting to bind it with static, permanent ropes. When you notice a loved one shifting into a dark mood, or when you observe an unread message on your screen, your intellect immediately constructs a rigid pack-saddle of worry. You strap their potential disappointment directly to your spine, tightening the harness with the small, sharp pins of guilt. You tell yourself that you must maintain this precise tension until their internal weather clears up. This is how we layer a secondary, systemic injury upon the original difficulties of life. The actual event is merely a passing cloud, but your determination to hold it rigidly in place turns your own muscles into stone. True mindfulness, when translated into the language of your midnight fatigue, is simply the willingness to notice how tightly the leather guards are pressing into your skin. It is the quiet capacity to observe the creaking of your own internal timber without instantly reaching to pull the ropes even tighter. You begin to see that the frantic thoughts circling your mind are not commands that you must fulfill before dawn. They are simply the wet fibers of an overstrained habit swelling in the dark. By pausing to witness this inner friction, you introduce a tiny wedge of space between the weight of the world and your immediate reaction to it. You discover that you can hold an awareness of another person's pain without converting your own bones into a permanent scaffolding to bear it. When we explore the concept of shedding our attachments, we are not talking about abandoning the path or throwing away our capacity to love deeply. We are talking about releasing the artificial stiffness that turns our devotion into a source of constant bruising. We are learning to grease the wooden joints of our heart so that they can slip, adjust, and move with the natural sway of existence. The world around you is constantly shifting. Its currents are vast and unpredictable, and your attempt to hold everything perfectly square only guarantees that your cedar frame will crack under the pressure. Compassion is not an act of rigid endurance. It is the soft, flexible space that allows both you and the traveler beside you to stumble without shattering the bond between you. Slowly, the ancient lesson becomes deeply personal, moving out of the misty mountain story and entering the quiet space of your current bedroom. Think of how many times you have lain in this exact position, your neck locked against the pillow, your stomach tied into a tight knot of anticipation as you rehearse how to fix a situation that has not even occurred yet. You are acting as if you are the sole pillar supporting a roof that was built to stand on its own foundation. The old trail keeper did not tell Sora that his load was too heavy. He merely pointed out that the joints of his saddle had become completely solid from the dampness. The danger was not the salt. The danger was the lack of play in the wood. In a moment, we will look closer at the knots you have tied within your own flesh, learning how to allow the iron wedge of awareness to create a small clearing where your breath can move freely again. There is still a deeper function of the timber joints that the old layman has not yet demonstrated, a secret that changes the way we understand the very nature of support. But before that truth reveals itself, let us look at the immediate tension you are sustaining right now. If you feel ready to turn your attention inward and examine the hidden harnesses of your own body, say continue. If it feels right, let your attention sink beneath the world of spoken thoughts and drop directly into the physical coordinates of your body. Perhaps you can begin by bringing a very soft, unhurried awareness to the landscape of your chest and shoulders, noticing without any desire to fix or alter whatever is present. You might perceive a dense, compact sensation where your neck meets your back, a localized hardness that behaves exactly like wet wood that has swollen tight within its mortise joints. There is no need to fight this constriction. There is no requirement to banish it from your flesh before you are permitted to rest. Even noticing the presence of the tightness is enough to begin inserting a small, quiet space around it. Take a slow, effortless breath into the very center of that structural tension. Imagine that your breath is not an aggressive tool meant to break anything open, but rather a cool, fluid mist that gently seeps between the tightly bound fibers of your muscles. As you let the air slide out, notice if there is a tiny, instinctive downshift in your collarbones, an entry of play into a frame that has been held rigid for many hours. Perhaps you can feel the mattress receiving the heavy timbers of your posture, allowing the bed to take over the work of holding you together. You do not have to stand upright on the ridge tonight, and there is no ledger of village expectations that you must balance before your eyes close. Now, as you lie in this protected dark, allow one specific lingering worry about another person's situation to surface in your mind. Do not run toward it to resolve it, and do not try to push it away as an unwanted visitor. Simply let it take its shape in the theater of your awareness. If you look at it closely, you might recognize the exact emotional signature of the overloaded pack saddle, the familiar, urgent whisper that says you must not loosen your grip or someone will suffer. Notice how your mind automatically tightens the hemp ropes around this image, trying to secure the problem so it cannot move or change. In your imagination, if it feels comfortable, you might visualize this heavy concern as a raw, white block of mountain salt sitting upon a weathered wooden shelf. See the rough texture of its crystals, and notice how the edges are weeping, dropping heavy, briny beads into the dark soil. Instead of lifting the frame or trying to brace your spine beneath it, simply imagine placing the entire wooden structure flat on the cool, damp earth of the mountain trail. You are not smashing the salt, and you are not abandoning your care for those who need nourishment. You are simply letting the earth take the direct weight of the shelf for a little while, allowing the wood to lie completely unladen in the mist. Watch what happens to the white block when you stop holding it above the ground. In the quiet theater of your mind, the mountain drizzle continues to fall, a steady, cooling wash that brushes over the rough facets of the salt. Because you are no longer holding the frame rigid, the water can move freely through the wood. You might observe the sharp, heavy corners of the mineral block beginning to soften, losing their jagged definition as they slowly, effortlessly melt into the clear rain. The dark soil absorbs the mineral water without any conflict, and the green cedar frame rests empty, its fibers beginning to dry out and breathe in the open night air. There is absolutely no need to force a profound transformation tonight. If your mind continues to reach out for the ropes, or if the old habit of hypervigilance returns to check on the cargo, meet that movement with a deep, non-judgmental patience. The habit of carrying the world is old and deep, and it does not disappear through a single act of iron willpower. You can return to the simple rhythm of your breath whenever you are ready, letting the image dissolve into the background like mist clearing from a cedar ridge. You are safe enough right now to let your hands remain completely open on the sheets. In a moment, our path will return to the small timber hut on the ledge, where the old trail keeper has not yet finished adjusting the swollen wood of the harness. The storm is growing closer, but the nature of the shelter is changing. When you are ready to return to the story and look deeper into the flexible design of the wooden joints, say continue. The wind outside the small trail hut intensified, rattling the loose shingles of the thatch roof and driving the mountain rain in sharp horizontal sheets across the stone ledge. Sora sat on the dirt floor of the shelter, his back resting against a pile of dry pine logs, while the cedar packsaddle lay beside him, still tightly holding the white blocks of salt. The small room smelled of old moss, wood ash, and the bitter scent of wet tallow grease. Kenji knelt before the wooden apparatus, his scarred fingers moving methodically along the joints where the vertical slats met the horizontal shelves. He did not look at Sora, but his hands worked with a quiet, certain rhythm that seemed completely unaffected by the rumbling thunder in the valley below. Sora watched him with a rising sense of internal panic, his fingers twitching against his knees, as if they were still searching for the missing guide ropes of his harness. He looked out through the open doorway at the sheer drop of the cliffside, where the darkness had swallowed the path entirely. He stated that the storm would soon turn the trail into a river of mud, expressing his deep fear that if they stayed in the hut, the village at the summit would believe he had abandoned his task out of cowardice. He believed that his presence was required on the ridge, regardless of the danger to his own safety. He could not shake the image of the cold communal kitchens, visualizing the disappointed faces of the families who relied on his strength. The old trailkeeper did not argue with the young man's urgency, nor did he offer words of praise for his sense of duty. Instead, Kenji picked up the small bowl of cold tallow and began to smear the thick, white grease directly into the square mortise holes where the cedar pegs connected the frame. He then took his wooden mallet and began to strike the side of the vertical slats, not to break them apart, but to force the pegs to slide back and forth within their sockets. The sound of the wood shifting was a sharp, grating noise that echoed through the small timber structure. Sora winced with every blow, believing that the old man was intentionally loosening the only structure that kept the heavy salt from slipping into the mud. Kenji stopped his work and gestured for Sora to come closer, pointing to the central pin that held the two main halves of the pack saddle together. He explained that when the frame was crafted in the lowlands, the builder had carved the mortise joints with a tiny amount of intentional emptiness around the pegs. He demonstrated that when the wood was dry, the frame could twist, bend, and give way slightly whenever the traveler stumbled on an uneven rock. He pointed out that because Sora had allowed the rain to saturate the bare timber without any protective grease, the cedar had swollen to its absolute limit, eliminating the gap and turning the flexible basket into a rigid sheet of ice. Sora knelt by the damp wood, his hand hovering over the greasy joint but not quite touching it. He asked how a loose, unstable frame could possibly carry a heavy load through a mountain gale, arguing that if the joints were allowed to wobble, the balance would change with every step, making the journey twice as difficult. He stated that his own body had to remain completely rigid to compensate for the weight, believing that any softness inside the wood would result in total failure on the steep stone steps. He could not conceive of safety existing anywhere outside of absolute unyielding control over the cargo. The old layman picked up a short piece of weathered bamboo from the corner of the hut, placing it between his calloused palms and twisting it in opposite directions. The green wood bent under the pressure, its fibers sliding across one another with a low creaking sound. Yet the tube remained perfectly whole. Kenji stated that the ancient support beams of the temple at the peak had stood for 300 years through earthquakes and winter blizzards, precisely because they were never nailed rigidly to the foundation stone. He explained that the building survived by allowing the wind to move through its joints, shifting its weight from side to side without ever trying to fight the mountain. He looked at Sora and remarked that the young man was currently trying to be stronger than the storm, using his own bones to replace the natural flexibility of the wood. A massive gust of wind struck the side of the trail hut, forcing a spray of cold rain through the doorway, soaking Sora's tunic and causing the tallow candle on the floor to flicker wildly. In that sudden moment of absolute vulnerability, as the structure around him groaned under the immense force of the air, Sora felt a deep shift inside his chest. He did not stand up to secure the door, and he did not reach out his hands to steady the wooden pack saddle. He simply sat on his heels in the dark, letting his breath flow deep into his stomach before his mind could construct another scenario of disaster. He allowed himself to sit entirely with the cold reality of the storm, recognizing that his internal resistance had no power to quiet the wind outside. He reached down slowly, his fingers touching the slippery, greased cedar peg of the frame. For the first time, he did not try to pull the rope tighter or check the squareness of the corners. He pushed the vertical slat with his palm, watching the wood slide smoothly within its mortise socket, moving a fraction of an inch to the left, then returning to its center with a quiet, easeful play. Sora realized that the flexibility of the joint did not mean the frame was broken. It meant the wood was finally capable of sharing the burden with the trail itself. He stopped treating the emptiness inside the joint as a flaw that needed to be eliminated, seeing it instead as the exact space that allowed the traveler to survive the weight. Sora did not become instantly free of all his anxieties, and he did not magically forget the village waiting at the summit. He simply picked up the rag from the floor, dipped his fingers into the remaining tallow, and began to help the old man grease the remaining pegs of the saddle. He performed the action with a slow, deliberate focus, choosing to tend to the immediate wood before his hands, rather than walking through tomorrow's mud in his thoughts. The transformation was small and quiet, a simple cessation of the habit of treating every internal creak as an emergency that required his complete exhaustion to fix. When you are ready to explore how this flexible movement applies to the heavy structures within your own mind, say continue. When we bring this ancient understanding into the quiet chamber of your Latinite thoughts, the hidden architecture of your emotional exhaustion begins to reveal its mechanism. The mind has a deeply rooted habit of treating its own internal distress as a sign that it must instantly build a more rigid fortress. When an unexpected difficulty appears, or when you sense a shift in the affection of someone important to you, your immediate instinct is to lock down your entire internal landscape. You assume that by rehearsing every terrible scenario, by checking the tension of your ties over and over, you can somehow prevent the world from sliding out of square. This compulsive need to construct a permanent guarantee of safety is the exact source of the heaviness you feel in your bones right now. You are turning the natural, fluid movements of human life into a series of rigid emergencies that require your continuous, agonizing defense. Ancient insight points to a critical boundary between the basic friction of existence and the extra weight we build around it. Life, by its very nature, will always present elements that are damp, cold, and challenging to carry. People will have their own private storms, relationships will face seasonal shifts, and your own physical body will experience moments of genuine fatigue. This is the simple gravity of walking a mountain path, yet notice how your intellect automatically treats this baseline reality as an intolerable failure on your part. You tell yourself that if you were wiser or more patient or completely sufficient, the people around you would never feel a single pang of sorrow. You take the passing mist of another person's mood and use it to build a heavy structure of self-criticism, turning their independent path into a personal trial where you are always found guilty. This internal habit is how we convert a temporary shadow into a fixed identity of suffering. We look at our natural limitations, our inability to make every single person perfectly comfortable, and we mistake that boundary for a fundamental flaw in our own heart. We begin to look at our relationships through the lens of a debtor, constantly scanning the environment for any hint that our performance has fallen short of perfection. We assume that if we are not actively sacrificing our own rest, if we are not constantly bracing our shoulders beneath their problems, we have failed in our duty to love them. This is the supreme misunderstanding of the helpful mind, confusing a rigid, swollen cage of worry with the expansive, generous reality of genuine compassion. True kindness does not require you to eliminate the space inside your joints until your own spirit cracks under the pressure. Consider how much energy you expend every day simply trying to grease the wheels of everyone else's emotional universe. You look at their faces, you listen to the tone of their voices, and your mind immediately begins to draft a complex blueprint to fix whatever is broken. You carry this invisible engineering project into your bed at night, turning the dark room into a workstation where you continue to adjust the ropes and pegs of tomorrow's interactions. This continuous mental planning is an attempt to manufacture certainty out of an unpredictable world. It is the ego's way of pretending that it possesses a steering wheel over the currents of another person's destiny. But your worry has never once prevented a single storm from hitting the ridge. It has only ensured that you are already thoroughly bruised by the time the rain arrives. Peace does not manifest because you have successfully engineered a life where no one is ever disappointed in you. It appears when you finally stop treating their disappointment as an indictment of your right to exist on the earth. It is born from the willingness to allow a small, intentional play to remain within the joints of your interactions, recognizing that every human being must find their own balance on the stone steps. When you stop trying to act as the permanent anchor for their happiness, you drop the artificial requirement to be more than a single person walking through the dark. You discover that you can remain deeply connected, deeply loving, and thoroughly helpful without converting your own life into an unyielding pack saddle to hold their burdens. This shift in perspective is not an intellectual concept that you must struggle to master before dawn. It is a soft, somatic release that happens the moment you perceive how much structural strain you have been applying to a frame that was designed to bend. You look at the swollen timber of your hypervigilance, and you choose to stop hammering the pins deeper into the wood. You let the wedge of clear awareness sit quietly between your sense of responsibility and your immediate need for rest, allowing the artificial tension to drain away into the floorboards. The people you love are held by the same immense earth that holds you, and they do not require your utter exhaustion to remain standing. In a moment, we will look at how this flexible play operates within the specific ordinary details of your daytime routine. We will explore how to carry this softness into the moments when your phone buzzes, or when someone you care about drops into a cold silence in your presence. But before we bring the mountain wisdom into your waking world, let the deep weight of your ribs settle completely into the mattress. When you feel ready to look at how this internal play changes your daily life, say continue. This internal flexibility reveals its true value during the ordinary sequence of your daytime routine, far away from the quiet shelter of your bedroom. Consider the moment your fingers reach for your phone, checking the smooth glass screen for a reassurance that has not yet arrived. Notice how your stomach automatically tightens when you observe a delayed reply, or when a close companion offers a short, clipped greeting. Your mind immediately begins to manufacture a heavy wooden frame around that simple absence, tightening the hemp cords of your attention until your whole chest feels restricted. You begin to draft multiple explanations for their silence, assuming that your recent actions have caused a secret rift. In that exact micro-moment, ancient wisdom offers you a choice to pause, allowing a tiny sliver of play to enter your internal timber before you reach out to pull the ropes tighter. You can learn to sit beside an unanswered notification without instantly treating the stillness as an emotional emergency that requires your exhaustion to fix. When the phone remains dark, or when someone you care about retreats into a quiet room, your intellect will tell you that you must pace the floor until the balance is restored. It will insist that you must stay hypervigilant, monitoring their internal weather like a guard bracing for a sudden storm on the ridge. But you have the capacity to observe that internal panic without offering it your complete obedience. You can choose to leave the unread message alone for an hour, letting the situation rest on the ground rather than strapping it to your collarbones. By refusing to turn every digital pause into an indictment of your worth, you allow the swollen cedar of your worry to dry out in the fresh air. Think of how many afternoons you spend wearing a pleasant, compliant smile, while your inner landscape is completely crowded out by the moods of those around you. You walk through the office or the kitchen acting as a human cushion, absorbing their daily frustrations, their unstated demands, and their sudden drops in temperature until your own spirit feels thoroughly bruised. You do not state your own boundaries because you fear that if you say no, the fragile structure of their comfort will shatter into pieces because of your selfishness. You assume that your exhaustion is the only tax that guarantees the continuity of your relationships. Yet this constant yielding is not a genuine expression of love. It is a rigid habit born from the terror of being found insufficient. You are permitted to let your true face show, stepping down from the impossible task of acting as the structural mortar for everyone else's life. This same flexible play can be brought into the moments when you look at your own progress, comparing your position to the milestones achieved by your peers. Your mind will frequently whisper that you have fallen behind the correct timing of the road, telling you that your current state of uncertainty is proof of a fundamental failure. It builds a heavy, multi-tired pack saddle of societal expectations, forcing your spine to bend beneath the weight of where you believe you should have been by this season. But your life is not a linear cargo run that must be completed at a frantic sprint to satisfy a panel of judges. You can breathe into the soles of your feet right mid-stride, recognizing that the ground beneath you is perfectly stable, even when the path ahead remains completely obscured by the mountain mist. Allowing yourself to seek rest during a hectic week is not a luxury that you must meticulously earn through a flawless performance. You do not need to deliver every block of salt to the summit before your body is granted permission to unbuckle its harness. The world outside will continue its vast, spinning movements regardless of whether you are standing on the ledge or lying flat on a clean straw mat. When you choose to step away from a demanding task, turning your back on the endless checklist of obligations, you are not committing an act of cold abandonment. You are simply recognizing that your endurance has a natural boundary, and that honoring that limit is the most profound form of discipline you can practice. You are letting the road carry itself for the night. Tomorrow, when the daytime world resumes its loud demands, you will likely feel the old instinct to tighten your shoulder straps returning to check on the cargo. The habit of hypervigilance will look at a loved one's frown and try to convince you that you must freeze your own joints to keep them upright. When that familiar creaking begins in your chest, remember the old trail keeper's mallet and grease. Take one slow, deliberate breath, letting your jaw drop slightly away from your teeth before you offer a response. Choose to care for them with an open, spacious palm rather than an iron fist that tries to control the direction of the wind. You will find that you can remain thoroughly helpful, deeply compassionate, and completely present without converting your own bones into a permanent bridge for their path. In a moment, the final light of the evening will dissolve entirely, and the mountain story will draw to its quiet close on the ridge. The timber hut is settling into the deep dark, and the wind is beginning to lose its sharp edge. When you are ready to let the entire teaching dissolve into the stillness of a deep, restorative sleep, say continue. The mountain trail hut has grown completely quiet now, as the last embers of the iron stove fade into dark plum-colored ash. Outside, the sharp gale has thinned out into a soft, steady sighing through the upper canopy of the cedar grove, a gentle sound that carries no more threat or urgency. The cedar pack saddle rests flat on the earthen floor, its wet wood completely unburdened, its hemp ropes uncoiled and lying loose in the dark. The white blocks of salt have settled into their place on the ground, no longer requiring a single shoulder to keep them above the mud. The small tallow candle has burned down to its base, and the room has dissolved into an immense, protective darkness that extends across the entire ridge. Let the rhythmic cadence of that distant mountain rain slow down the movement of your current breathing, matching its steady downward flow. Your chest is rising and falling with a quiet, natural ease, requiring absolutely no effort from your willpower to maintain its pace. Feel the deep, dense weight of your hips and thighs sinking completely into the mattress, as if the bed itself were a wide, welcoming valley floor that knows exactly how to support you without asking for any proof of your utility. Your shoulders are widening out, dropping their old defensive posture, allowing the leather guards of your daily duties to slide away into the dark corners of the room. You have officially stepped down from the watchtower for the night. The internal trial you have been conducting since dusk has finally run out of words. The prosecutor has left the courtroom. The ledger of your perceived debts has been safely rolled up, and there is no one left to pronounce a verdict upon your heart. You do not need to figure out how to navigate tomorrow's steep stone steps while your eyes are trying to close. The people you love are resting under the same broad sky that blankets your own roof, and they are entirely safe within the care of an earth that knows how to hold its own weight. Let the small intentional gaps inside your joints open up completely, allowing the cool night air to wash through the spaces where you used to hold the tension. Your breath is becoming smaller, thinner, and perfectly quiet, a soft tide moving over a smooth shore. The image of the mountain ridge is slowly fading into a dark, spacious background of peace, leaving only the immediate comfort of your resting flesh. You are permitted to let go of the steering wheel of everyone else's happiness, allowing their currents to drift exactly as they must while you seek your own shelter. The wood has been thoroughly greased, the knots have been unlinked, and the frame is completely empty. There is nothing left to secure, nothing left to balance, and no one left to rescue before the light disappears entirely. As the absolute stillness of the bedroom wraps itself around your consciousness, let your mind slide beneath the world of forms into a deep, uninterrupted slumber. The darkness is total, heavy, and completely kind. You are safe enough to soften every remaining fiber of your being, trusting that the world will not fracture if you dare to sleep. And if the structural peace you have been trying to manufacture for everyone else was actually waiting for you to discover the play inside your own timber. The silence that follows this question does not demand an immediate answer from your tired intellect, nor does it require your mind to go searching through the forest of your memories to find a solution. It is simply a spacious entry point, a wide clearing in the density of your thoughts, where the heavy timbers of your responsibility can finally settle into the cool earth. The mountain rain outside the window continues its slow, rhythmic tapping, a patient sound that has been repeating itself since the beginning of the world, reminding you that nature does not rush its work to satisfy a human schedule. The air in your room remains cool, clean, and perfectly still, providing a soft, protective sanctuary where the echoes of the daytime world can naturally thin out and disappear. You can feel the deep, honest gravity of your body pressing into the mattress, a heavy, comfortable sensation that shows your muscles have completely surrendered their need to brace against the wind. As you lie here in the complete protection of the dark, let your awareness slide even deeper into the soft space beneath your ribs, noticing how the simple movement of your breath has become a quiet, effortless companion. Each inhalation enters like a cool mist through a cedar grove, bringing a wide, unhurried spaciousness to the center of your chest, while each exhalation carries away the very last traces of structural tightness from your shoulder blades. You might perceive that the internal harness you carried for so long has left no permanent bruise upon your spirit. The exhaustion you felt was merely the temporary swelling of the wood, a natural reaction to a damp season that has now passed into the history of the path. The frame is entirely unladen now. Its joints are loose and flexible, and it rests on the solid floorboards without an ounce of strain. Consider how the ancient trees on the high ridges survived the winter, not by growing thicker bark or building iron braces to fight the gale, but by allowing their branches to become completely hollow, light, and compliant. When the heavy snow falls upon their needles, they do not hold their limbs rigid until the wood snaps under the accumulation. They simply dip their tips toward the dark ground, letting the white weight slide off effortlessly into the soil before returning to their natural, upright posture. Your own heart possesses this exact built-in flexibility, a quiet, non-judgmental capacity to bend with the shifting moods of the world without ever losing its root in the deep earth. You do not need to turn your spine into an unyielding pillar to prove your devotion to those you love. You can care for them deeply while allowing your own branches to remain soft, open, and completely free to move in the dark. The people whose faces you scan today are now resting within their own private boundaries, held by the same immense patient gravity that holds your own mattress. Their internal weather is their own path to walk, their own stone steps to navigate, and your determination to carry their packages has never once altered the trajectory of their journey. By stepping down from the impossible task of managing their comfort, you are not depriving them of your love. You are offering them something far more profound, a clear, undistorted space where they can discover the strength of their own feet on the trail. You are demonstrating that it is safe to stumble, safe to be imperfect, and completely safe to rest when the night closes the ledger of the day's labor. Your silence tonight is not an act of cold abandonment. It is a generous sanctuary where both you and those you care for can finally stop performing. Let the soft repetition of the falling drizzle soothe the remaining corners of your active mind, washing away the lingering impulse to organize tomorrow's conversations. You do not need to draft a single sentence or prepare a defensive shield before the sun rises over the cedar groves. The future is an unwritten scroll that remains safely tucked away in the dark, and it does not require your hypervigilance to arrive in its proper order. The mattress beneath you is completely solid, completely uncritical, and it will continue to hold your entire weight without asking for a single explanation of your worth. Your breathing has become a faint, almost imperceptible whisper, a quiet wave of air that moves through an open room without disturbing a single object on the shelves. You are safe enough now to let the borders of your identity dissolve entirely into the heavy, comforting dark of the bedroom. The room has no walls that can press against your spirit, and the night has no demands that can crowd out your peace. Every knot has been unlinked, every cedar peg has found its natural play within the mortise, and the ropes are resting loose on the clean straw mat. The work of holding the universe together has officially ceased for the evening, and there is absolutely nothing left for your awareness to guard or protect. Let your body sink a fraction of an inch deeper into the soft, welcoming mattress, surrendering the very last coordinates of your position to the immense, restorative sea of sleep. The darkness is total, heavy, and completely unified with your own heart, offering you a timeless home where you can rest without needing to earn your place. The path ahead is quiet, the mountain is still, and your spirit is entirely free to fade into the deep, undisturbed slumber that has been waiting for you since the world went quiet. The immense, cool shadow of the mountain ridge seems to stretch over the entire world now, absorbing every fragment of the day's friction into its quiet, undifferentiated mass. In this deep interval of the night, the mind finally discovers that it does not need to maintain an active watch over its own history, nor does it need to keep a protective hand on the latch of tomorrow's gate. The heavy cedar pack saddle, having been greased and adjusted by the old trailkeeper, sits completely undisturbed in the corner of the timber hut, its wood absorbing the cool, clean moisture of the high-altitude air. Because the structural play has been restored to the mortise sockets, the frame no longer holds any internal strain or trapped tightness. It simply rests as an assembly of simple, natural elements, waiting for nothing, defending against nothing, and perfectly aligned with the stone floorboards beneath it. Let this total absence of demand penetrate the very deepest layers of your awareness, spreading a soft, stabilizing coolness through the muscles of your neck, your jaw, and your lower back. Your body is making a profound, effortless contact with the bed, allowing its natural weight to be carried entirely by a surface that asks for no justification, no metrics of success, and no reassurance before it offers its absolute support. You can perceive the slow, rhythmic expansion of your ribs as a gentle, non-judgmental tide, a quiet movement that occurs all on its own without any direction from your conscious intellect. The breath enters like the faint rustle of wind through distant ferns, and it leaves like water soaking into the deep, dark ground, leaving the surface entirely clear, calm, and undisturbed. We often spend our lives operating under the secret, exhausting illusion that our hypervigilance is the only currency that keeps our relationships from falling into ruin. We treat our thoughts like a small band of imperial couriers, sending them running back and forth across the misty ridges to check on the emotional states of everyone we have ever known, terrifying ourselves with the idea that our silence is a form of negligence. Yet, if you look into the immense darkness of this room right now, you will see that the space itself is completely unburdened by these frantic journeys. The void around you does not require your anxiety to remain spacious, and the people you love do not require your structural exhaustion to find their own balance on the earth. The mountain does not collapse when the trailkeeper sets down his mallet, and your world will not fracture if you choose to unbuckle your harness and allow your mind to go completely dark. Consider how the clear mountain pools at the summit receive the autumn rain, not by organizing each drop into a complex pattern, and not by building rigid stone barriers to dictate where the water must fall. The pool remains completely still, open and receptive, allowing the rain to enter its depths, diffuse its ripples, and naturally become one with the immense body of water that was already there. Your awareness possesses this exact same spacious nature, a vast, translucent depth that can hold the presence of another person's struggle or your own past errors without ever becoming damaged or crowded out by them. You do not need to convert your spirit into a hard, defensive shield to face the uncertainties of life. You can remain as an open basin, letting the weather of the world pass through your landscape without leaving a permanent scratch upon the slate. The quiet cadence of the drizzle outside the glass has become a seamless, hypnotic lullaby, a soft, repetitive sound that gently dampens the last remaining echoes of your analytical thoughts. Each drop that lands on the roof is a quiet reminder that the day has officially surrendered its authority over your attention, and that the night has opened a vast, unmapped territory where no problems need to be solved. You do not need to carry a single unsaid word or a hidden debt into the territory of your dreams, for the dark has no scale to weigh your performance and no ledger to track your worth. The cedar frame is flat on the mat, the ropes are loose, and the space inside the joints is completely empty, allowing the wind to pass through without causing a single creak in the timber. You are completely insulated, completely unjudged, and thoroughly safe within this boundaryless dark. Let your consciousness drift away from the world of names, numbers, and obligations, sinking smoothly into the heavy, restorative current of a deep and peaceful sleep. The boundaries of your body are softening into the sheets, losing their sharp definition against the dark room, until there is no longer any distinction between the quiet air and your own resting spirit. The mountain is still, the trail is empty, and the shelter is perfectly secure, leaving you with absolutely nothing left to hold, nothing left to fix, and no one left to protect before the dawn arrives. Turn your back on the final fragments of the path, letting your awareness dissolve entirely into the immense, comforting ocean of slumber that has been waiting all night to receive your weight. And what if the ultimate form of love you can offer to the world tonight is simply the willingness to trust that it can hold itself together while your eyes are closed? The echo of this final inquiry gently ripples out into the immense room, losing its sharp edges against the soft fabric of the dark, just as a single splash in a deep mountain lake gradually widens until the surface becomes perfectly flat once more. There is no longer any need to chase the answer, or to force your mind to build a defensive wall of explanations to justify your fatigue. The night has grown so vast and quiet that the small, demanding voice of your analytical intellect simply has no room to expand. The soft, continuous murmur of the rain outside the glass window acts like a comforting blanket of sound, smoothing over the jagged ridges of your daytime concerns and cooling the heated tracks left by the old harness. You can feel the profound, restorative gravity of the earth drawing your spine down into the mattress, an effortless stabilization that signals to your entire nervous system that the work of the day is officially complete. As you lie here in this absolute sanctuary of the dark, let your attention sink even lower, dropping away from the world of words and resting entirely within the soft, spacious rhythm of your own heart. Each breath arrives like a slow, cool mist drifting through an ancient valley, filling the spaces between your ribs with a light, unhurried ease that requires no struggle to maintain. With each downward release of your breath, imagine the very last fibers of your hypervigilance uncoiling, loosening their grip on the wooden pegs of your responsibility, and melting away into the floorboards. The cedar pack saddle of your old patterns is completely empty now, resting flat on the clean mat with its ropes lying loose and its joints fully relaxed. There is no cargo left to guard, no impending storm to outrun, and no expectation that you must fulfill before your consciousness is permitted to dissolve. We often spend our waking hours under the hidden, crushing illusion that our constant worry is the only thread preventing the lives of our loved ones from falling into chaos. We mistake the rigid, frozen posture of our anxiety for a genuine expression of devotion, believing that if we stop monitoring their expressions or anticipating their needs, we have failed them. But if you look into the boundless, undisturbed dark surrounding you right now, you will realize that true connection does not require your structural exhaustion. The sky does not fall when the bird stops flying, and the people you care for will not lose their way on the mountain steps simply because you have chosen to close your eyes and rest. By allowing yourself to unbuckle the heavy frame of your hyper-responsibility, you are entering a deeper, more trusting relationship with the universe, recognizing that the earth knows exactly how to hold every traveler without your continuous intervention. Consider how the old timber bridges in the high hills endure the changing seasons, not by standing as rigid, solid walls against the rushing winter streams, but by possessing a tiny, intentional space within their wooden joints that allows them to sway and breathe with the current. They do not fight the immense power of the water. They yield to its movement, shifting their weight from side to side without ever breaking their anchor in the stone banks. Your own spirit is designed with this exact same resilient play, a quiet, spacious capacity to witness the difficulties and moods of the world without needing to freeze your own bones to fix them. You can love with an open, flexible palm rather than a clenched fist that tries to control the direction of the wind. Tonight, let the rigid pins slide completely out of your thoughts, allowing the natural space within your heart to expand until there is nothing left but a vast, undisturbed quiet. The soft, hypnotic cadence of the drizzle has become a seamless melody that gently dampens the last remaining whispers of your daytime identity. The labels you wear, the tasks you perform, and the invisible ledger of obligations you keep have all vanished into the heavy, comforting dark of the bedroom. You are no longer a protector, a provider, or a manager of anyone else's internal weather. You are simply a resting being, perfectly safe, completely unjudged, and thoroughly insulated by the night. The empty cedar frame is still, the path outside is empty, and the shelter is perfectly secure, leaving your awareness with absolutely nothing left to solve, nothing left to carry, and no one left to rescue before the morning sun arrives. Turn your face away from the final, fading fragments of the day's journey, letting your mind slide smoothly beneath the surface of thought into the deep, restorative ocean of a peaceful slumber. Let the boundaries of your physical form soften completely into the sheets, merging with the quiet, dark air of the room until your breathing becomes a faint, weightless wave that leaves the stillness entirely untouched. The mountain is at rest. The high valley is quiet, and your spirit is completely free to drift into the immense, comforting embrace of the sleep that has been waiting all night to receive your weight. Slide effortlessly into the dark, unmapped territory of your dreams, unladen, unbound, and thoroughly at home in the quiet of the universe.